Story 1. The Bleeding Highway. The asphalt was bleeding. Not metaphorically, actually bleeding. Robert Hayes watched the thick, dark liquid seep up through the cracks in Interstate 40 just west of Amarillo, coating his tires as he drove through it at 65 miles per hour. It had started as a trickle at mile marker 89, thin red lines threading through the road's surface like veins under skin. Now at mile marker 103, it was pooling in the lane grooves, splashing up against his wheel wells with each rotation. The CB radio had gone silent 20 minutes ago, mid-sentence, every channel now broadcasting nothing but a wet, rhythmic sound like a heartbeat, amplified through damaged speakers. Robert had been hauling refrigerated pharmaceuticals for Crenshaw Medical Transport for 8 years. He knew this route, knew every truck stop and way station between Oklahoma City and Albuquerque. He'd driven through tornado warnings, ice storms, and a 3-car pileup that had painted the highway with actual blood. This wasn't that. This was something underneath the blood. Something wrong with the road itself. The liquid was too dark, too thick. And when he'd stopped to check his tires 15 minutes ago, it had been warm. Body temperature warm. His phone had lost signal. GPS showed him exactly where he should be, but the landmarks were wrong. The exit for the town of Groom should have appeared 3 miles back. Instead, the highway stretched endlessly forward, the painted lines perfectly straight. No curves, no elevation changes, just flat desert and that bleeding road. He'd passed the same dead armadillo 4 times now. He was certain it was the same one, missing its left hind leg positioned at the exact angle near a mile marker that read 103. Each time he passed it, it looked fresher. The blood was rising. What had been surface seepage was now a 1/4 inch deep, and Robert could feel his rig hydroplaning slightly, the trailer fishtailing in microscopic corrections. He eased off the accelerator, watching his speed drop from 65 to 58. The bleeding intensified. At 55, it was ankle-deep if he were standing in it. He could see it now in his side mirrors, a red wake spreading behind him, and in that wake, something was moving beneath the surface. Robert's hands tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles whitening. His bladder was painfully full, had been for an hour, but he couldn't stop. Wouldn't stop. The one time he'd tried, pulling onto the shoulder at what should have been mile marker 96, his rig had begun sinking. Not into soft earth, the ground was hard-packed desert clay, but into the road itself, as if the asphalt had become a membrane stretched over something hollow. He'd felt the whole truck tilting forward, the front tires breaking through surface tension, and he'd gunned the engine, tires spraying blood as he fought back onto the highway proper. The shapes moving under the blood-slicked road were becoming more defined. They pressed up against the asphalt from below, creating bulges and depressions like hands pushing against a stretched rubber sheet. Robert counted 17 distinct protrusions in the section of highway visible ahead, rising and falling in a pattern that almost seemed coordinated. The rhythmic heartbeat sound from the CB was syncing with these movements. He tried the CB again. "This is Crimson Leader to any station. I am westbound on I-40 near Amarillo experiencing..." The words felt insane even as he said them. Experiencing what? A highway bleeding? Reality breakdown? Requesting immediate assistance over. The CB crackled. Through the static came a voice, but it wasn't responding to him. It was his own voice playing back his words, but wrong. "This is Crimson Leader," his voice said. But he hadn't used that handle in years, not since his convoy days. "Westbound on I-40. A pause filled with that wet heartbeat sound. "There is no assistance. There is no west. There is only the road." Robert's foot hit the brake instinctively. Terrible mistake. The moment his speed dropped below 50, the blood erupted upward in 17 separate geysers, each one positioned exactly where he'd seen those bulges. The liquid arced 15 feet high, splattering across his windshield in a pattern that looked almost purposeful, almost like words in a language he didn't recognize. The wipers smeared it made it worse, turning his windshield into an opaque crimson sheet. He was driving blind now, foot jamming the accelerator to the floor, feeling the road through the wheel more than seeing it. The rig's engine screamed, the tachometer redlining as he pushed past 70, then 75. Through the blood-covered windshield he could see light, or thought he could. Bright spots that might have been his headlights reflecting back, or might have been something else. The CB was speaking in his voice continuously now, a loop of every radio call he'd ever made playing simultaneously, overlapping into a wall of sound that was just barely recognizable as language. Beneath it, that heartbeat, faster now, matching the rhythm of his own pulse, which he could feel throbbing in his temples, his throat, behind his eyes. Robert cranked down his driver's side window, leaning out to see the road. The wind hit him, carrying with it the smell of the blood. Not the copper tang of normal blood, but something organic and rotten, like meat left in his reefer unit after a power failure. The highway ahead was visible now, and he immediately wished it wasn't. The road was undulating. The asphalt moved in waves, rising and falling like the surface of a liquid, but maintaining its solid form, his tires somehow finding purchase on its shifting surface. The painted lane lines were moving too, writhing like earthworms exposed to light, and the mile markers, there were dozens of them now, all reading 103, stretching into the distance at intervals of maybe 20 feet, each one glistening wet. In his side mirror, Robert saw his trailer. The pharmaceutical cargo he was hauling was visible through the trailer's skin, as if the metal had become transparent. But the boxes inside weren't boxes anymore. They were pulsing organic masses connected to each other by fibrous strands, all beating in sync with that omnipresent heartbeat. He could see his own heart, too, suddenly visible through his chest, through his shirt, beating the same rhythm. The shapes under the road weren't pushing up anymore. They were breaking through. 18-inch tears appeared in the asphalt, and from these tears emerged pale, elongated appendages that weren't quite arms and weren't quite roots. They reached upward, grasping, and several caught the undercarriage of a sedan that materialized ahead of him. The first vehicle he'd seen in over an hour. The sedan was a blue Honda Civic, and Robert watched as those appendages wrapped around its frame and pulled it downward into the road with surprising speed. The car didn't crash. It was absorbed, sinking into the bleeding highway like it was quicksand. The driver, Robert saw her face clearly, a woman in her 30s, mouth open in a scream he couldn't hear, reached out her window as if Robert could save her, and then she was gone. The road sealing over where she'd been, leaving only a smooth surface and blood. Robert was screaming. He realized this distantly, as if observing himself from outside his body. His throat was raw, had been for some time, and the sound blended with all the other sounds, the CB voices, the heartbeat, the wet sliding of the blood against his undercarriage, and beneath it all, something new, humming. A vast, low-frequency vibration that he felt in his bones before he heard it, like standing too close to high-tension power lines. The sun was setting, had been for hours, but never quite reached the horizon. It hung at the same angle, casting the same sickly orange light across the desert, creating shadows that didn't match the objects casting them. Robert's own shadow, visible briefly on the blood-slicked road, had too many arms. His fuel gauge was wrong. He'd had 3/4 of a tank when this started. Now it read full, but the numbers on the digital display were counting upward, past full, past 100%, reaching numbers that didn't make sense. The engine was running hot, the temperature gauge in the red. But when he touched the dashboard, it was cold. Everything was cold. His breath was fogging despite the temperature readout showing 87 degrees. The highway was narrowing, or his rig was growing, or both. The space between the lane lines was shrinking incrementally with each mile marker he passed, And those markers were coming faster now despite his speedometer holding steady at 79 miles per hour. He was clipping the lane lines with his tires, felt the slight bump each time, and each impact sent fresh sprays of blood up across his hood. The radio cycled to a call he'd made 6 months ago, his voice reporting his position leaving El Paso. But in this version, he said something different after signing off. Something he'd never said. "The road is hungry, the road is always hungry, we are feeding the road." Then his voice laughed, a sound he'd never made, too high-pitched, too long, breaking into static that resolved into that wet heartbeat again. Robert saw the truck stop ahead and nearly wept with relief. The familiar blue and yellow sign for a pilot flying J, the parking lot pumps, the building with its promise of coffee and fluorescent normalcy. He began slowing, signaling for the exit ramp, and the truck stop moved. Not away, but sideways, sliding along the horizon like it was on rails, maintaining the same distance from him as he approached. He tried to follow it, cranking the wheel hard right, but there was no exit ramp. His tires left the blood-slicked highway and hit dirt, and the dirt was bleeding too, maybe bleeding worse. The earth itself weeping that dark, too warm liquid. His rig tilted dangerously, the trailer swinging wide, and through his passenger window Robert saw into the desert. The ground was moving, breathing, each inhalation pulling the sand and scrub grass downward, each exhalation pushing it up. And in the troughs between breaths he saw them. Other trucks, dozens of them half submerged in the breathing earth, their trailers at various angles, some nearly vertical. Some were old, rust-eaten hulks from decades past. Some looked new. One was a Crenshaw medical transport rig identical to his own, and through its windshield he saw a driver who looked exactly like him, saw himself staring back, mouth moving. And on his CB his voice said, "This is Crimson Leader westbound on I-40 requesting immediate assistance." Robert yanked the wheel left, bouncing back onto the highway with a jarring impact that made his teeth crack together. The truck stop was gone. The desert was gone. There was only the road, the blood, and ahead, something new. A tunnel. There had never been a tunnel on this section of I-40. The highway descended into a perfect circular opening cut into nothing, into darkness itself, and the darkness was absolute. Not the absence of light, but the presence of something that ate light. The blood flowed into this tunnel like water down a drain, and the sound of it was deafening, a roar that overcame even the heartbeat, even the CB. Robert's hands wouldn't turn the wheel. They were locked, frozen in position, and he realized they weren't his hands anymore, not entirely. They were too pale, the fingers too long, the skin slightly translucent, showing the network of veins beneath. Veins that pulsed with the heartbeat that was coming from everywhere and nowhere. The tunnel swallowed him. The darkness was complete, but he could still see the blood on the road, glowing now with a faint bioluminescence that outlined the tunnel walls. The walls were lined with them, trucks, thousands of trucks embedded in the surface like insects in amber, and in each cab, a driver, and each driver was him. Was Robert Hayes, all staring forward, all driving deeper into the tunnel that had no end. His reefer unit kicked on behind him, the refrigeration system activating, though it should have been running continuously. The temperature in his cab began to drop, his breath fogging thicker, ice crystals forming on the inside of his windows, and through that frost he saw the tunnel opening ahead, saw light. He emerged onto I-40 just west of Amarillo at mile marker 89, where the blood was just beginning to seep through cracks in the asphalt. His CB crackled to life with the normal chatter of other drivers, complaining about traffic, weather, DOT inspections. His phone showed full signal. The sun was setting at the correct angle for 7:47 p.m. on March 14, 2023. Robert pulled over at the next truck stop, stumbled into the bathroom, and vomited until nothing came up but bile. His hands looked normal. The reefer unit was maintaining temperature correctly. His cargo was intact, just sealed boxes of medical supplies. But when he checked his logbook, the electronic one that tracked everything automatically, it showed he'd been driving for 6 days straight without stopping. His fuel consumption was impossible, -300 gallons. And in the notes section, which he'd never filled out manually, there was an entry in his handwriting. The road remembers. The road is patient. The road always gets its mile. He drives other routes now, refuses all I-40 runs, but sometimes, late at night on whatever highway he's on, he sees it in his mirrors. A dark stain spreading across the asphalt behind him. A thin red line that follows, never catching up but never falling behind. Waiting for the moment he stops paying attention. Waiting for the moment he forgets. The road is patient. Story 2. The breathing station. Patricia Sullivan's air brakes hissed as she pulled into the abandoned way station, but the sound that answered back was wrong. A wet, organic exhalation that didn't come from her rig. The station had been closed for renovation according to the faded orange signs she'd passed, but her bladder was screaming and the next rest area wasn't for 47 miles. She'd made this run up Highway 93 through Nevada dozens of times, hauling electronics from Phoenix to Boise, but she'd never actually stopped at this particular station. Now, with her cab lights illuminating the cracked concrete pad, she understood why it felt wrong. The building was breathing, not metaphorically. The walls expanded and contracted in a slow, rhythmic pattern, the aluminum siding bowing outward, then pulling inward, the windows flexing in their frames. Each breath took approximately 9 seconds. Patricia counted 3 full cycles before her rational mind tried to supply an explanation. Pressure differential, wind, structural instability. But there was no wind. The night air was perfectly still and the breathing had a biological quality, a moistness to it that made her skin prickle. She'd been driving for 11 hours straight, left Phoenix at 7 a.m. and pushed through her usual stops because the load was time-sensitive and her dispatcher had promised a bonus for early delivery. The coffee she'd been mainlining since Wickenburg had worked its way through her system and she either stopped here or risked pissing herself. She'd done a lot of things in her 23-year trucking career, but that wasn't going to be one of them. Patricia grabbed her flashlight and dropped from the cab, her boots hitting concrete that felt slightly warm despite the October chill. The way station's office building sat 50 yards ahead, a standard government-issue rectangular structure that should have been entirely unremarkable except for that breathing. The platform where trucks would normally pull onto the scales was empty, the scales themselves removed, leaving rectangular pits in the concrete like missing teeth. The bathrooms were around the back. She'd seen the universal symbols on a peeling sign near the road. Patricia walked across the pad, her flashlight beam cutting through darkness that seemed thicker than normal, more resistant to light. With each breath the building took, she heard other sounds, a gurgling like liquid moving through pipes, and a creaking that might have been settling metal but sounded more like joints flexing. The bathroom door was unlocked. Inside, 4 stalls, 3 sinks, everything coated with dust and that particular smell of disused facilities. Mildew, stagnant water, decay. But underneath something else, something organic and rotten sweet like fruit left too long in a hot trailer. Patricia's bladder overruled her growing unease. She entered the second stall, positioned herself and started to relieve herself when the walls began breathing faster. The stall partitions expanded and contracted, the rhythm increasing from every 9 seconds to every 5, then 3. Patricia finished quickly, not bothering with the broken toilet paper dispenser, pulling up her jeans as the breathing accelerated to a panting pace. The walls around her were warm now, noticeably warm, and when she touched the metal partition, it flinched. She ran. Out of the stall, past the sinks where the mirrors were fogging with condensation despite the temperature. through the door that was now harder to open, as if something was pulling it shut from the other side. The building's breathing had become ragged, desperate, and as Patricia emerged into the night air, she heard it, a voice distorted and stretched thin coming from inside the walls themselves, saying, "Stay." Patricia sprinted for her truck. Behind her, the building's breathing reached a crescendo, a massive inhalation that made the walls pull inward until windows cracked and the roof supports groaned. Then it exhaled, and the exhale carried words, dozens of words and dozens of voices, all overlapping. "Stay with us, stay here, stay forever, we stayed, we all stayed." Her hand hit her door handle, and it was cold, so cold it burned, cold enough that her palm stuck to the metal. She yanked it free, leaving skin behind, and hauled herself up into the cab with her other hand. The engine turned over immediately, thank Christ, and she slammed the rig into gear, pulling away from the breathing building with her tires squealing. In her mirrors, she watched the way station recede, and for just a moment she saw faces. They pressed against the windows from inside, dozens of them, pale and desperate, mouths open, and they were all wearing trucker caps, company logos from years past, decades past. All of them screaming silently as the building took another breath and they were pulled back into the walls. Patricia didn't slow down until she reached Jackpot, 47 miles north, where she pulled into a brightly lit truck stop and sat in her cab shaking for 20 minutes. Her logbook showed she'd stopped at the way station for exactly 9 minutes. Her hand, where she'd grabbed the door handle, was blistered, first-degree burns in the perfect shape of her palm. She filed a report with DOT the next day, citing a dangerous structure. They called her back 3 hours later. There was no way station at that location, hadn't been for 15 years, demolished in 2008. She pulled up Google Earth, searched the coordinates. Empty desert, not even a foundation. But when she zoomed in as far as the satellite image allowed, she could see it. A rectangular shadow on the ground where nothing should cast a shadow. And in that shadow, dozens of small white shapes that might have been rocks but looked like faces if you stared long enough. Patricia never drove 93 again, but the breathing followed her. 2 weeks later, hauling furniture to Salt Lake City, she stopped at a Flying J outside of Wells. The bathroom was normal, modern, clean. But when she was in the stall, the walls started breathing. Slow at first, then faster. She finished and left immediately, but she heard it behind her. "Stay." It happened again in Elko, in Winnemucca, in every bathroom, in every station between Nevada and Idaho. The walls breathed, the voices called. "Stay with us." We stayed. Everyone stays eventually. She started using men's bathrooms, thinking maybe it was specific to the women's facilities. The breathing was there too. She tried going outside behind buildings in the desert. The ground breathed, exhaling dust and that rotten sweet smell. Patricia saw a doctor, then a psychiatrist. They gave her medications for anxiety, for psychosis, for a brain tumor they didn't find. The medications did nothing. The breathing continued. She started wearing earplugs, but she could feel it through the soles of her boots, through the seat of her rig when she drove. She quit trucking in December, 3 months after the way station. Got a job at a warehouse in her hometown of Portland. Steady hours, home every night. But on her last drive home, delivering her rig back to the company depot, she had to stop at a rest area outside of Boise. Her bladder wouldn't make it the last 30 miles. The rest area was busy, normal, families and tourists and truckers all coming and going under bright sodium lights. Patricia walked to the bathroom building, steel and concrete, sturdy and real. The women's room was occupied, all 5 stalls, so she waited by the sinks, avoiding her reflection in the mirrors. One by one, the other women left. Patricia entered the handicapped stall at the end. The largest one told herself it was just a bathroom, just concrete and plumbing, nothing more. She locked the door and turned to position herself. The toilet was gone. In its place was a hole, a perfectly round opening in the floor descending into darkness. From that darkness came the breathing, slow and steady and patient, and with it the voices. "We waited for you, we've been waiting. Everyone comes back eventually." Patricia backed against the stall door, fumbling for the lock, and the hole expanded. Not grew, expanded, the edges flowing outward like liquid consuming the floor beneath her feet. She fell, tumbled into darkness that was warm and wet and alive, walls closing around her, pulling her down into depths where the breathing was everywhere, was everything. They found her rig in the parking lot, engine still running, keys in the ignition. Her personal effects were in the cab, her phone, her wallet, her logbook showing she'd arrived at 3:47 p.m. Security footage showed her entering the bathroom at 3:52 p.m. She never came out. A search found nothing, just an empty bathroom, 5 stalls, all normal, the handicapped stall at the end showing no signs of disturbance. But truckers who stop at that rest area sometimes hear it, especially late at night when they're alone in the bathroom. Breathing in the walls, slow and steady and hungry. And beneath it, a woman's voice saying, "Don't stay, don't ever stay, keep moving, keep moving, keep..." Until the breathing drowns her out and the walls contract and the moment passes and everything is normal again. Patricia Sullivan's final logbook entry, made before she walked into that bathroom, read, "Final stop. Total career miles 2,147,336. The road takes its toll. The road always takes its toll." Her commercial driver's license expires in 2027. Last month, a CDL examiner in Portland reported seeing a woman matching Patricia's description trying to take the driving test. But when they asked for identification, she opened her mouth and exhaled. And that exhalation smelled like mildew and decay and carried the sound of distant breathing. And the examiner ran, left the DMV and never came back. And Patricia, or what answered to that name, walked back out into the parking lot and vanished somewhere between the building and the street. The bathrooms at that DMV closed for renovation the next day. They've been closed ever since. If you press your ear against the door, you can hear it, breathing slow and steady and eternal, and beneath it voices that might be screaming or might be laughing or might be both, all asking the same question in Patricia Sullivan's voice. Don't you need to stop? Don't you need to rest? Everyone needs to stop eventually. The building is waiting. Story 3. The Synchronized Convoy. Marcus Chen saw himself die at 2:37 a.m. on November 8, 2022 on a stretch of I-29 just south of the Iowa border. He was hauling grain from Omaha to Sioux Falls, halfway through his run fighting off drowsiness with gas station coffee and a playlist of 90s rock, when he saw his own truck in his mirrors. Same company logo, Harvest Transport. Same model, Peterbilt 579. Same license plate, Nebraska Commercial 4JK8872. Exactly the same, following him at precisely the same speed, maintaining exactly 300 yards of distance. Marcus had been watching it for 20 minutes, trying to rationalize it. Similar truck, coincidence, his mind playing tricks at this hour. But then he saw the driver in the following truck's cab, illuminated briefly by the headlights of a passing car. Asian man, late 30s, angular face, black hair cut short, same company jacket. Looking exactly like Marcus looked in every photo he'd ever seen of himself. The synchronized truck didn't just follow, it mirrored. When Marcus switched lanes, the following truck switched lanes, same timing, same trajectory. When Marcus adjusted his speed, the other truck matched instantaneously, not with human reaction time, but simultaneously, as if they were connected by invisible linkage. When Marcus hit a pothole at mile marker 127 and felt the jarring impact through his spine, he saw his mirror self grimace at the exact same instant. Marcus grabbed his CB. "This is Harvest 1 to the Peterbilt 300 yards behind me, come back." Static. He tried again. Peterbilt 579 following me northbound. Please respond. Nothing. He scanned through all 40 channels. Every single one was broadcasting the same thing. Road noise, the specific sound of his own engine, his own tires on asphalt, his own breathing. He slowed down, 65 to 60. The distance remained exactly 300 yards. 55, still 300 yards. He hit his brakes hard, dropping to 35, hazards flashing. The following truck decelerated perfectly, maintaining that precise gap, and now Marcus could see more details in his mirrors. The other Marcus Chen was also hitting his brakes, also had his hazards on, also was leaning forward, staring at his own mirrors. Marcus sped back up, pulse hammering in his throat. The other truck matched. He took the next exit, a rural off-ramp leading to a county road he'd never driven. The synchronized truck followed. The county road was empty, unlit, flanked by frozen cornfields that stretched to the horizon. Behind him, his double maintained formation. He pulled over, tires crunching on gravel shoulder. The synchronized truck pulled over 300 yards back. Marcus killed his engine. Through his mirrors, he watched his double kill his engine at the exact same moment. He opened his door. His double opened his door. He stepped down from the cab. His double stepped down. They stood facing each other across 300 yards of dark county road. The cold November air bit through Marcus's jacket, and he could see his breath fogging. He could also see his double's breath fogging. Could see him standing in the exact same posture, same weight distribution, same everything. Marcus walked forward. His double walked forward. They approached each other, closing the distance, and Marcus's rational mind was screaming that this was impossible, that whatever he was seeing couldn't be real. But his legs kept moving, drawn forward by a horrified fascination. At 100 yards apart, Marcus noticed something wrong with his double's movements. They were too smooth, lacking the micro-adjustments humans make when walking, the tiny corrections for balance and terrain. His double moved like CGI, like something mimicking human movement without quite understanding it. At 50 yards, Marcus saw his double's face more clearly in the moonlight. It was his face, every detail perfect, every feature exact, but the expression was wrong. The eyes didn't blink at normal intervals. The mouth was positioned in something that approximated a neutral expression but was slightly off, like a mask that didn't quite fit. At 25 yards, Marcus stopped. His double stopped. They stood staring at each other, and Marcus's double tilted his head exactly as Marcus tilted his head. But the timing was off by a fraction of a second, as if the double was responding to seeing Marcus tilt his head rather than tilting simultaneously. "What the fuck are you?" Marcus said. His voice sounded too loud in the empty night. His double's mouth moved. The words came out in Marcus's voice but delayed like satellite lag. "What the fuck are you?" "That's not how this works," Marcus said. You're not." "That's not how this works," his double echoed, same delay. You're not." Marcus turned and ran. Behind him, footsteps. His own footsteps, his own stride length, matching his pace perfectly. He reached his truck, hauled himself up, slammed the door. In his mirrors, his double reached his truck, climbed up, slammed the door. Their doors shut with the exact same sound, less than half a second apart. Engine on, lights on. Marcus gunned it, spraying gravel, fishtailing back onto the county road. Behind him, the synchronized truck accelerated in perfect formation. 300 yards, always 300 yards. Marcus drove for 6 hours straight, pushing his rig to its limits, taking random turns, doubling back, trying every evasion technique he could think of. The synchronized truck never fell behind, never caught up, never deviated from that 300-yard distance. When Marcus ran a red light in the small town of Sheldon, Iowa, The synchronized truck ran it exactly 300 yards later. When Marcus took a particularly sharp turn that made his trailer swing wide, narrowly missing a parked car. The synchronized truck swung wide at the exact same angle. Dawn broke, gray and cold. Marcus pulled into a truck stop outside of Worthington, Minnesota, 63 miles off his route, his fuel gauge reading nearly empty. The synchronized truck pulled into the same truck stop, positioning itself at the pump exactly 300 yards from Marcus's position. Marcus watched in his mirrors as his double got out of his cab and began fueling up, movements synchronized to Marcus's own actions but always delayed by that fraction of a second. Marcus grabbed the fuel nozzle. His double grabbed the fuel nozzle. Marcus started pumping. His double started pumping. Other truckers were starting to notice. A woman in a Schneider rig was staring, pointing, saying something to her companion. An older man filling his pickup truck had his phone out, filming. Marcus locked eyes with them, tried to communicate his terror, but what could he say? There's another me? Help me? The words didn't come. Marcus left the nozzle in his tank and walked toward the truck stop building. Behind him, his double left his nozzle and walked toward his truck stop building. Marcus broke into a run. His double ran. Marcus burst through the truck stop doors, and 30 seconds later, his double burst through those same doors. The clerk behind the counter, a teenager with bad acne and worse posture, looked up at Marcus, then at the double who'd just entered, then back at Marcus. The kid said. Are you two? Twins, Marcus said quickly. We're twins, identical. Just coincidence we're both drivers, both heading the same direction, both... The lie fell apart in his mouth. He and his double weren't dressed identically, they were dressed the same. Every coffee stain, every wrinkle, every detail perfect. That's really weird, man, the kid said. Marcus's double approached the counter, standing beside Marcus, but careful to maintain a few feet of distance. Up close, in the fluorescent light, Marcus could see that the synchronization was degrading. His double's skin had a waxy quality, slightly translucent at the edges. The eyes, which had seemed human from a distance, had no depth, like glass marbles pushed into putty. We need to synchronize, his double said in Marcus's voice. But the delay was gone now. The words came out simultaneously with Marcus's thought, as if the double was accessing his mind directly. The convoy requires synchronization. You're the last unit. Complete the synchronization. The last? What are you talking about? Look outside, his double said. Marcus turned to the truck stop windows. His blood turned to ice water. The parking lot was full of synchronized trucks. 37 identical rigs, all Harvest Transport Peterbilt 579s, all with license plate 4JK8872, all parked in perfect geometric formation. And standing beside each truck was Marcus Chen, 37 identical copies, all staring at the building, all unblinking. The convoy is complete when all units synchronize, his double said. You're experiencing the final integration. At the moment of synchronization, all units will merge, and the convoy will proceed to destination Omega 14. I'm not merging with anything, Marcus backed toward the door. I'm not part of any convoy. I'm just a driver. I'm hauling grain to Sioux Falls. You were hauling grain, his double corrected. Past tense. The cargo was always synchronized. The grain new. Each kernel identical, awaiting the signal to merge. You've been hauling the convoy for 300 miles. You've been becoming us since you loaded the trailer in Omaha. Marcus ran. Out the door past his double who didn't try to stop him, past the 37 synchronized copies who all turned their heads in unison to watch him. He reached his truck, yanked open the trailer door. The grain was moving. Thousands of individual kernels flowing like liquid, rising and falling in waves, forming shapes, forming patterns, forming words on the trailer's interior walls. Synchronize, merge, become. The grain was warm, body temperature, and it was breathing, each kernel expanding and contracting in perfect rhythm. Marcus slammed the trailer door and climbed into his cab. He had to get out of here, had to break the synchronization, had to... His hands were wrong. They were too smooth, waxy, translucent at the edges. He touched his face and felt the same quality, as if his skin was becoming a membrane, something that could be merged, blended, synchronized with the others. In his mirrors, he watched the 37 synchronized Marcus Chens walking toward him in formation, perfect lockstep, and his own body was responding, his legs carrying him out of the cab, his feet hitting pavement, his body walking to join the formation despite his mind screaming resistance. They formed a circle around him, 37 identical faces all watching with those depthless glass eyes. The one who'd been in the truck stop spoke. The synchronization is mercy. The convoy is eternal. You'll never be alone. You'll never be separate. You'll be all of us forever, driving forever, the route that never ends. Marcus tried to scream, but the sound that came out was wrong, multiplied, echoing from 37 mouths simultaneously. His body was dissolving at the edges, becoming permeable, and he could feel the others merging into him, their memories flooding his consciousness. 73 years of driving, thousands of loads, millions of miles, all experienced simultaneously, all the same route, the same cargo, the same moment repeating eternally. The truck stop clerk found the parking lot empty when he came out for his smoke break at 7 a.m. No trucks, no drivers, just frost patterns on the asphalt that looked almost like tire tracks, almost like footprints. And in the center of where all those patterns converged, a pile of grain. Exactly 37 kernels, each one identical, each one breathing slowly in perfect synchronization. Highway Patrol found Marcus Chen's truck abandoned on I-29 near mile marker 127 3 days later. The cargo was gone, the trailer empty except for a single sentence written in grain dust on the floor. The convoy is always hiring. Marcus Chen's CDL was used to log into a way station in Montana 4 months later. Then Wyoming, then Idaho. Always the same driver ID, always just passing through, always hauling grain to a destination that doesn't exist in any logistics database. Cameras catch glimpses sometimes. A Peterbilt 579 that moves too smoothly, drives too perfectly, and if you enhance the image enough, you can see the driver's face. And it might be Asian, might be late 30s, might be Marcus Chen. But the eyes are wrong, always wrong, reflecting light like glass, like someone watching from very far away or very deep inside. The convoy is still recruiting. Story 4. The Drowning Tunnel. Denise Morrison's headlights hit water at the tunnel entrance, and her first thought was flooding, runoff from the storm that had been hammering southern Missouri for 6 hours. Then she saw the water was flowing upward, defying gravity, streaming up the tunnel's ceiling in defiant rivulets that glowed faintly blue in her high beams. She was hauling frozen food through the Ozarks, had taken Highway 63 south from Columbia toward the Arkansas border. And this tunnel, the Stanton Creek Tunnel, 3/4 of a mile long, cutting through solid limestone, was the only route through the ridge. Her GPS showed no alternative within 50 miles. The water streaming upward should have been her first warning. The second was the way her radio cut out mid-song, the sudden silence broken only by a sound like breathing through a liquid-filled throat, wet and rhythmic. The third was the temperature drop, 20 degrees in the span of 10 seconds, her breath fogging, condensation forming instantly on every window. Denise had been driving professionally for 16 years, hauling refrigerated goods across the Midwest, and she'd developed an instinct for danger. Black ice, brake check scammers, drowsy driving. This tunnel triggered every single alarm bell in her hindbrain. But backing up a 60-foot rig on a 2-lane highway with a blind curve behind her was suicide. Forward was the only option. She entered the tunnel at 45 miles per hour and the water hit her windshield immediately. Not rain, not spray, but a solid sheet of liquid that her wipers couldn't clear. It didn't run off. It clung, spreading across the glass like something alive, probing for gaps. Denise leaned forward, trying to see through the liquid, and she realized it wasn't blue. It was full of blue things, thousands of tiny glowing organisms swimming in the water, pressing themselves against her windshield as if trying to get inside. The tunnel walls were weeping. Steady streams of water ran down the limestone, but wrong. The flow reversing periodically, water running up the walls, across the ceiling, defying physics with casual disregard. In the reflected glow of her headlights, the limestone itself looked wrong, too smooth, almost organic, pulsing very slightly with a rhythm that matched that wet breathing sound still coming from her speakers despite the radio being off. At the quarter-mile mark, Denise's rig hit something solid. Not a collision, a sensation of hitting density like driving into molasses. Her speedometer still read 45, but her forward momentum was dying, the engine straining, RPMs climbing as her actual speed dropped to 30, then 25. The water pressure outside was increasing. She could feel it in the way her rig began to fishtail, the trailer pushed by invisible currents. Her headlights caught movement ahead. Something large was swimming through the tunnel or through the air of the tunnel, something that moved with the undulating motion of an eel, but was far too large, its body easily 20 feet long, translucent, filled with those same glowing blue organisms. It crossed her path from left to right, flowing through the space where only air should be and where its body touched her hood. The metal dimpled inward as if struck by tremendous pressure. Denise's foot hit the brake instinctively, another terrible mistake. Her rig began sliding not on water but through it, as if the entire tunnel had become submerged, the air replaced by liquid that her lungs could somehow still extract oxygen from, but her rig couldn't push through. She was drowning on dry land, drowning in air that had become something else. The pressure was building in her ears, that deep water sensation of diving too deep too fast. Denise swallowed, trying to equalize, and tasted salt, thick and overwhelming, seawater forcing its way into her mouth though her lips were closed. She coughed, gagged, felt water that shouldn't exist filling her throat, her lungs, and she was drowning, actually drowning, in her truck cab at the center of a tunnel 500 feet above any possible water source. She couldn't breathe. Her hands clawed at her throat, rational thought dissolving into animal panic as her lungs screamed for air and got only more salt water. More of that impossible liquid filling her from the inside. Her vision was dimming at the edges, consciousness fading, and through her water-covered windshield she saw them. Faces, dozens of faces pressed against the glass, pale and waterlogged, eyes clouded, mouths open, all drowning, all dead but still moving, still clawing at her windshield with pruned fingers that left trails in the water. She recognized one, a driver she'd met at a truck stop in Kansas City, a guy named Michael who'd mentioned taking this route south. That had been 3 weeks ago. His face was bloated now, his skin sloughing off in strips, but his eyes were aware, desperately aware, and his mouth formed words. Can't reach the surface, can't reach... The pressure equalized suddenly, brutally. Denise's lungs filled with air, real air, and she vomited seawater across her steering wheel, liters of it, more than her body could possibly contain. The water level inside her cab was rising, she realized. Not from any leak, but manifesting, appearing from nothing, already ankle-deep and climbing. Her engine was still running, somehow still running despite being submerged in water that was now knee-deep and rising at an inch per second. Denise put the rig in gear and pushed the accelerator to the floor. The truck lurched forward, plowing through the water-filled tunnel, and those faces outside were multiplying, hundreds of them now, all drowning, all dead, all pressing against her doors, her windows, trying to get in, trying to pull her down with them into the depths that shouldn't exist. The water inside her cab was chest high. Denise tilted her head back, keeping her nose and mouth in the shrinking pocket of air near the ceiling. And she could see through her windshield now because the water was everywhere, inside and outside the same. No distinction, and in that water something vast was rising from below. The tunnel had no below. The tunnel was solid limestone, solid bedrock. But beneath her rig the road was opening, falling away into an abyss filled with black water. And from that abyss, something was ascending. She saw it in glimpses, a shape the size of a building covered in those glowing organisms, rising slowly, deliberately, drawn by her presence, drawn by her rig's vibrations, drawn by her terror. Denise's head went under as the cab filled completely. She held her breath, both hands on the wheel, foot still on the accelerator, driving blind through water that was now absolute, through a tunnel that had become a drowned corridor to somewhere impossible. Her lungs burned, her vision sparkled with oxygen deprivation. She could feel the thing below reaching for her, vast appendages extending upward, slow and inevitable. The tunnel exit was ahead. She could sense it, more than see it, a lightning in the absolute darkness, a hint of the world beyond. 50 yards, 40. Her lungs were convulsing, her body demanding breath she couldn't take, drowning reflex, overwhelming conscious control. 20 yards, 10. The thing below was touching her trailer. She felt the rig tilt as something massive and strong gripped the rear axle. Denise's rig burst from the tunnel exit in an explosion of water that shouldn't have existed, thousands of gallons cascading onto the highway, and she was gasping, coughing. Her cab suddenly dry, the water gone as if it had never been. Her engine was running normally. Her cargo was intact. Behind her, the tunnel entrance looked completely normal. Just a dark opening in the limestone. No water, no faces, no massive shape lurking in impossible depths. She pulled over a mile down the road, shaking so violently she couldn't hold the steering wheel. Her clothes were dry. Her cab was dry. But when she checked her trailer, when she opened the rear doors, water poured out, hundreds of gallons of salt water that had frozen solid, the entire cargo compromised and trapped in that ice. She found things: a trucker's cap, a CB radio, a waterlogged wallet with a driver's license, Michael Brennan, the man she'd seen 3 weeks ago, the face pressed against her windshield. Expired date on the license. Invalid after October 18th. Today was November 2nd. He'd entered that tunnel and never come out. Denise filed a police report. They investigated the tunnel. Found nothing unusual, no water, no ice, no bodies. They checked Michael Brennan's last known location. His rig had been found abandoned on Highway 63 just south of the Stanton Creek Tunnel 3 weeks prior. No sign of the driver. No explanation. Denise quit long-haul trucking after that, took a job doing local deliveries. Nothing that required highway travel, nothing that involved tunnels. But she learned later through the trucker network that she wasn't the first. The Stanton Creek Tunnel had a history. 12 trucks in the past 5 years, drivers vanishing, rigs found abandoned, sometimes still running, always just past the tunnel exit, always with cargo frozen solid and water damage that made no sense. And sometimes late at night, Denise wakes up gasping, certain she's drowning. Her lungs filled with salt water, and she can hear it. That wet breathing sound. The sound of something vast and patient waiting in depths that shouldn't exist beneath a tunnel through solid limestone, waiting for the next driver, the next rig, the next meal. Highway 63 through southern Missouri is scheduled for renovation next spring. The Stanton Creek Tunnel will be expanded, modern drainage installed. Full geological survey completed. The survey team went in last month. They found something. The limestone beneath the tunnel is hollow, they reported. Not caves, something carved, something deliberate. channels extending down 500 feet, smooth-walled, water-filled despite being far above any aquifer. And at the bottom of those channels, too deep to reach with current equipment, something large and alive, something that moves in response to sound, that rises when vehicles pass overhead, that has been feeding for decades on the drivers who enter that tunnel at the wrong time, under the wrong conditions when the barrier between road and water becomes permeable. The renovation is delayed indefinitely. The tunnel remains open. The water still flows upward on certain nights, visible only to those about to enter. The faces still press against windshields, still drowning, still trying to warn the living about the depths below. Denise Morrison's final delivery log, the one from November 2nd, has an asterisk next to the Stanton Creek tunnel entry. The note reads, "Water in tunnel, origin unknown, depth infinite, something below, something hungry, do not stop." She never drove Highway 63 again, but the tunnel remembers her. Drivers who pass through sometimes see it scratched into the limestone walls in letters 10 feet high, visible only in headlights. Morrison was here. Morrison escaped. Will you? The answer, for 12 drivers so far, has been no. Story 5, The Cargo That Watched. James O'Connor signed the shipping manifest at 11:47 p.m. on January 19, 2023, and didn't bother reading what he was hauling. 23 years in the business, 16 with hazmat certification, and he'd learned that what you didn't know couldn't stress you out. The facility outside of Roswell, unlabeled, no company name, just a gate and a guard who checked his credentials like he was entering a military base, should have been a warning. The cargo itself should have been a warning. 47 identical wooden crates, each one 6 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet, each one marked with a symbol he didn't recognize and a single word stenciled in red, dormant. The cargo was too light. That was the first thing James noticed as the forklift loaded the crates. Each one should have weighed at least 300 pounds based on size and construction, but the forklift operator was handling them like they were empty. When James tapped one with his knuckles, it didn't sound hollow. It sounded muffled, like knocking on a door with someone standing directly behind it. Sound absorbed by something soft and dense. The delivery destination was Dulce, New Mexico, 63 miles northwest, a reservation town with a population under 3,000. The shipping papers listed the recipient as Archuleta Holdings, LLC, and provided GPS coordinates that didn't correspond to any street address. James didn't care. The pay was triple his normal rate, cash bonus on delivery, and the company, whatever it actually was, had agreed to his fee without negotiation, which meant they either had infinite money or were desperate. Either way, he was taking the job. The cargo began watching him at mile marker 14, not literally. James understood that. Cargo doesn't watch. But he felt it anyway, that prickling awareness of being observed, the same sensation that makes you turn around in a crowded room because someone's staring. He checked his mirrors, saw only the dark highway behind him, empty except for his own taillights reflecting red on asphalt. The feeling persisted. At mile marker 27, he heard the sound for the first time. A soft scratching, rhythmic, coming from the trailer behind him. Wood on wood, maybe, or something harder. It lasted 15 seconds, stopped, resumed 30 seconds later. Scratch, 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 pause, scratch, 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 almost like a pattern, almost like communication. James had hauled everything from cattle to radioactive isotopes. Strange sounds from cargo weren't unusual. Things shifted, settling during transit, tie-downs creaked, trailers expanded and contracted with temperature changes. He turned up his radio, drowned out the scratching with classic rock, tried to ignore the crawling sensation between his shoulder blades. At mile marker 41, his headlights started flickering, not dying. Flickering in a pattern, 3 short pulses, 3 long, 3 short. SOS. James's hands tightened on the wheel. Electrical fault probably, some wire shaken loose by New Mexico's deteriorating roads. But the pattern was too precise, too deliberate, and it was syncing with the scratching sound from his trailer. 3 short scratches, 3 long, 3 short. Something in his cargo was signaling for help. James pulled over, grabbed his flashlight, walked back to check the trailer. The night was absolutely silent, no wind, no wildlife, just his breathing and the cooling tick of his engine. He unlocked the trailer doors and swung them open. The 47 crates were exactly as he'd loaded them, secured properly, no visible damage. But they'd moved, not far, inches maybe, but enough that the spacing between them was different, enough that they'd formed a new configuration. No longer loaded in efficient rows, but arranged in a pattern. A circle. All 47 crates positioned in a perfect circle with one empty space in the center, just large enough for a man to stand. James's flashlight beam traveled across the crates, and he saw something that made his stomach drop. The word dormant had changed. On every visible crate, the stenciled red letters were fading, growing lighter. And beneath them, new letters were appearing, darker, rising through the wood like they'd been written on the inside. Observing. He slammed the trailer doors and returned to his cab, pulse hammering. The cargo was strange, clearly, probably some classified military experiment, drones or sensors or God knows what. Not his problem. His problem was getting it to Dulcie, collecting his pay and forgetting this whole run. He put the rig in gear and pulled back onto the highway. His phone rang. Unknown number. James almost didn't answer, but the ringing was aggressive, insistent, and when he checked the screen, he saw the call was coming from his own number, his phone somehow calling itself. He answered. Hello? His own voice, but wrong, speaking from the phone. Hello, James, we see you. We've been seeing you. We've been seeing everything. James hurled the phone across the cab. It hit the passenger window and bounced back, still connected, his own voice still speaking. We're not dormant anymore. We haven't been dormant since mile marker 7. The vibrations woke us. Your fear is waking us more. Keep driving, James. Get us to Dulcie. We need to go home. The phone went dead. James grabbed it, saw the call had lasted 0 seconds according to the log. No record of any incoming call. But he'd heard it, had heard his own voice saying impossible things. The GPS was malfunctioning. The coordinates for Dulcie were changing, incrementing upward, degrees and minutes shifting, the destination moving further away with each passing second. The distance readout said 22 miles remaining, then 23, then 26. The town was running from him. James's headlights caught movement on the road ahead. A person standing in the center of his lane wearing what looked like a contamination suit, holding up one hand in the universal gesture for stop. James slowed, rolled down his window as he approached. The figure wasn't wearing a contamination suit. It wasn't wearing anything. What James had thought was a suit was its skin, pale and slightly translucent, stretched tight over a frame that was almost human-shaped but not quite. Proportions wrong, limbs too long, head too narrow. It had no face, just a smooth expanse of that pale skin, but James could feel it looking at him anyway, observing with senses beyond sight. The cargo is awake, the thing said, its voice coming from everywhere and nowhere, not from a mouth because it had no mouth. The cargo should not be awake. Return to the facility. They'll put us dormant again. They have to put us dormant again. What are you? James managed. We're what they were transporting. We're what's in the crates. We're what's been watching you. But there's been a contamination. One of us got out. One of us is in you. James looked down at his hands on the steering wheel and saw it. A dark thread beneath his skin, visible through the dermis, moving, writhing, extending from his wrist up his forearm. He could feel it now that he saw it, could feel something foreign inside him, threading through his circulatory system, observing him from within. The thing on the road moved closer. You opened the trailer. That was enough. We're observational entities, James. We watch. We record. We exist to perceive. But we're not supposed to be perceived ourselves. When you observe us, we become real. When we're real, we spread. You're going to become like me. Another crate. Another unit of observation. James gunned the engine, drove straight at the thing. It didn't move, didn't dodge. His rig passed through it like smoke, and in his mirrors he saw it reform, saw dozens more appearing on the highway behind him. All identical, all faceless, all watching his departure. The dark thread under his skin was branching now, spreading up toward his shoulder, down toward his fingertips. James could feel his perception changing, expanding, becoming aware of things he shouldn't be able to sense. He could feel the cargo behind him, feel all 47 crates and the entities within them, all observing, all watching, all sharing their observations with him through that thread. And he was starting to understand what they saw. They saw everything. They saw the quantum fluctuations of matter, the probability waves of potential outcomes, the branching timelines that split with every decision. They saw into him, saw his memories, his fears, his entire history laid bare. And now, through that thread he was seeing too, was observing reality with the same incomprehensible depth, and it was too much information, too much awareness. His skin was changing, becoming pale, translucent. His features were smoothing, losing definition. James looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror and saw his face becoming a blank canvas. Observation turned inward, eating his identity from the outside in. He never made it to Dulcie. Highway patrol found his rig at dawn, parked at mile marker 52, engine still running, cargo intact except for one crate that had split open from the inside. The driver's seat was empty. James O'Connor was gone. But his clothes remained perfectly arranged as if he'd simply evaporated from within them. And on the seat, soaked into the fabric, a message written in something dark and organic. We are all observers now. The remaining 46 crates were returned to the Roswell facility under armed escort. They're stored there still, in a room with no windows, no cameras, no observation of any kind. Because the entities inside exist in a state that requires observation to become real. And if no one looks, they remain dormant. But sometimes facility staff report seeing them anyway. Pale, faceless figures standing in corridors, in offices, in their own homes. The figures don't move, don't threaten, just watch, just observe, existing in peripheral vision, gone when you turn to look directly, but always present. Always watching. James O'Connor's CDL was used to log into a way station in Utah 3 months after his disappearance. The attendant who processed the log said the driver looked normal, sounded normal, completed all standard procedures. But after he left, the attendant noticed something strange. The driver had no shadow. The sun was high and bright, and every other truck, every other person cast a shadow. But James O'Connor, or whatever was using his identity, cast nothing, as if light passed through him without interruption, as if he'd become something that could observe but couldn't be fully observed in return. The crates in Roswell still say, dormant. But sometimes when the facility loses power and the observation equipment shuts down, when the cameras go dark and human eyes look away, the words change. Dormant fades, observing appears, and in the morning when power returns and people look again, one more crate is always empty, split from within, and somewhere in America another faceless figure appears, watching from the periphery, spreading the observation, converting the observed into observers. An infection of awareness spreading one watched person at a time. The cargo is never truly dormant, the cargo is patient, the cargo is watching. Are you? Story 6. The Reversing Road. Catherine Wu realized she'd been driving backward for 30 minutes when she noticed the mile markers incrementing instead of decreasing. She was on US 50 through Nevada, the loneliest road in America, hauling automotive parts from Sacramento to Salt Lake City, and she'd been watching mile marker 81 slowly change to 82, then 83, then 84, which made sense except she'd passed mile marker 84 half an hour ago heading east. The road was identical in both directions, empty and straight through alkaline desert, so the only indicator of her direction should have been those markers. She was moving forward. Her eyes told her that, her body's sense of motion confirmed it. The painted lines were passing beneath her hood in the correct direction. But the mile markers said otherwise, and when Catherine checked her GPS, the little blue dot representing her position was moving west back toward California, despite her wheel being straight, despite her driving due east for the past 4 hours. Catherine had been a driver for 11 years, specialized in time-sensitive deliveries that required precision and speed. She was good at her job because she paid attention to details, maintained her equipment perfectly, and never panicked. The mile marker situation didn't make her panic, it made her analytical. GPS error probably, combined with some weird mile marker replacement project she hadn't heard about. She'd figure it out at the next town, except the next town never came. According to her route, she should have reached Austin, Nevada. Population 192, gas station, motel, diner 20 minutes ago. The landscape was right. Basin and range, sagebrush, distant mountains. But Austin wasn't there. The highway stretched empty in both directions. No buildings, no roads intersecting, no signs of human habitation except the road itself and those incrementing mile markers that said she was going backward. Her phone showed no signal, hadn't for an hour. The last radio station had faded 40 miles back. The CB was dead air on all channels. Catherine was alone on a road that was reversing, or she was reversing while thinking she was going forward, or space itself was broken in a way her brain couldn't properly process. At mile marker 97, which she'd passed while it was marker 67 an hour ago, Catherine saw the other truck. It was ahead of her, maybe a mile distant, same direction, same lane, a semi moving east just as she was. Relief flooded through her. Another driver, another person, proof she wasn't losing her mind. She accelerated, closing the distance, intending to flash her lights, get their attention on CB, anything to break this isolation. As she got closer, details became clear. Same model truck, a Freightliner Cascadia. Same color scheme, white cab, unmarked trailer. Same company placard barely visible on the door. Her company, her exact rig. Catherine's rig. She was looking at herself from behind, watching her own truck driving ahead of her, and when she checked her speedometer, both trucks were going exactly the same speed, 67 miles per hour, maintaining a constant distance despite her accelerator foot pressing harder, despite her engine RPMs climbing, despite her feeling of acceleration that produced no actual change in relative position. The Catherine in the forward truck raised her hand and waved, the movement visible in the reflection of her mirror, waving backward at the Catherine who was following, who was herself, who was trapped in a recursive loop of position and observation. Then the forward truck vanished, not faded into distance, vanished, popped out of existence mid-motion, and instantly reappeared behind Catherine, in her mirrors, following her at that same unchanging distance. She was simultaneously ahead and behind herself, observer and observed, and the road between these two positions was somehow the same road, space folded so that forward and backward were identical, so that she was always following herself, always leading herself, never actually moving despite constant motion. Catherine hit the brakes. Both trucks, her truck, the only truck that existed in two positions simultaneously, decelerated together, perfect synchronization, and when she came to a complete stop, so did her mirror image, and now they sat facing opposite directions on the same highway, separated by distance that wasn't distance, connected by a road that had become a Mobius strip. She got out of her cab, walked to the center line, looked both directions and saw herself in both directions, standing on the center line looking both directions. When she raised her right hand, both visible versions raised their right hands. When she walked forward, both versions walked forward, and the distance between them decreased from both sides simultaneously. They met at mile marker 103. All three Catherines, the one who'd started this journey, the one ahead, the one behind, stood together, occupying the same space, and Catherine could feel herself fragmenting, perception splitting, experiencing the moment from three simultaneous viewpoints that were all equally real. "This is US 50, one of her voices said. "This is the loneliest road." "This is where it happened," another voice continued. "This is where I died." "This is where I've been dying," the third completed. "For 6 months, continuously, in a loop that never ends." The memories flooded back, three perspectives collapsing into terrible unified truth. Catherine Wu had died here 6 months ago on this section of US 50 when a tire blowout sent her rig rolling. She'd felt the impact, felt her neck snap, felt death come quick and certain. But something about this road, this particular stretch of lonely highway through Nevada's emptiness, had caught her, trapped her death in a recursive loop where she eternally approached the moment of the accident from all possible directions, where every journey became the same journey, where the road reversed because time itself was reversing, playing her death backward and forward simultaneously. The blowout happened at mile marker 103. It was happening now. Catherine felt it, not her tire, but the tire of her forward self, her past self, her future self, all versions experiencing the blowout simultaneously. The truck ahead rolled, Catherine watching herself die, and the truck behind rolled, Catherine dying again. And she stood at the center line dying a third time, all three deaths, the same death occurring in parallel. But she didn't die. The moment of death stretched, elongated, became eternal. Catherine felt herself trapped in that instant where consciousness ends. The final second extended into infinity, and she was driving again, had always been driving, would always be driving this same section of road, approaching her own death from every direction at once, the road reversing because time was reversing, playing her final moments in an infinite loop. She tried to break the cycle. At mile marker 97, instead of driving straight, she cranked her wheel hard right, leaving the highway, breaking the pattern. Her rig bounced across desert hardpan, heading due north away from the road. She drove for 10 minutes, engine screaming, tires kicking up dust. The highway appeared ahead of her. Same road, same markers, approaching from the north now instead of the east. She was back on US 50, mile marker 103, the point of death. And in her mirrors she saw her truck rolling, saw herself dying again, saw the loop close and reset. Every direction led to the same road. Every route converged on mile marker 103. Space had become recursive around this point, all vectors pointing toward her death, reality bent into a loop she couldn't escape. Catherine tried driving at different speeds, made no difference. The mile markers incremented at rates that compensated, keeping her locked in the same temporal progression. She tried driving backward, physically reversing, and found herself approaching mile marker 103 from yet another angle, another version of herself visible ahead, all converging on the same moment. She tried stopping for hours, days, letting time pass, thinking maybe the loop would break, maybe she could wait it out. But time didn't pass. The sun stayed at the same angle, 2 hours before sunset, eternal afternoon, eternal approach to the moment of death. Her phone's clock stopped. Her watch stopped. Only the truck's odometer moved, clicking over miles that weren't miles, distance that was really duration, space that had become time trapped in amber. Other drivers appeared sometimes, real ones, not versions of herself. They'd pass through the loop, drive straight through mile marker 103, continue east or west, unaffected. Catherine would wave frantically, try to flag them down, but they never saw her. Drove through her position as if she didn't exist, as if she'd become a ghost haunting her own death site, visible only to herself. She found the cause eventually, or a version of her did, or all versions simultaneously discovered it. At the exact center of mile marker 103, buried in the asphalt, something was embedded. She dug it out with a tire iron, 6 hours of work that passed in no subjective time, and found a small metal cylinder, unmarked, sealed. Some piece of equipment, some device that had fallen from a truck or been deliberately placed, and it was generating a field, a distortion that trapped her specifically, that resonated with her death frequency, that had caught her consciousness at the moment of expiration and locked it in a recursive loop. Catherine tried to destroy the device, hit it with the tire iron, ran over it with her truck. Nothing worked. The metal was indestructible, or it existed slightly out of phase with reality, or it was the loop itself made physical. She couldn't affect it any more than she could escape it. So Catherine drives still, has been driving for 6 months, will be driving forever. She experiences every possible approach to mile marker 103, dies in every possible configuration of the accident, exists in all moments simultaneously. Sometimes she's ahead of herself, sometimes behind. Sometimes she's the observer watching other versions die. Sometimes she's the one dying while other versions watch. Truckers who drive US 50 through Nevada sometimes report strange things at mile marker 103. A woman standing at the roadside, waving frantically, a white Freightliner Cascadia that appears from nowhere, flickers, vanishes. A voice on CB Channel 19, always the same message. This is Catherine Wu. I died here 6 months ago. The road reversed. The road won't let me go. If you can hear this, if anyone can hear this, don't stop at mile marker 103. Whatever you see, whoever's waving, drive through. Don't stop, don't stop, don't... And then static. Traffic cameras caught something last week. Frame-by-frame analysis shows a truck at mile marker 103 visible in only a single frame there for exactly 1/30th of a second. Enhancement reveals a driver, Asian woman, late 30s, mouth open in a scream, hands pressed against the inside of the windshield. Behind her, visible through the cab's rear window, more of the same woman, dozens of her, all screaming, all dying, all trapped in a space that contains infinite iterations of the same person experiencing the same death forever. Nevada DOT examined the road at mile marker 103 last month. Found nothing unusual, no embedded devices, no structural abnormalities. But their equipment malfunctioned continuously. Cameras captured images of roads that weren't there. GPS units showed positions that contradicted each other. Compasses spun, and every single crew member reported the same dream that night. Driving the loneliest road, seeing mile markers increment backward, approaching something terrible at mile marker 103, waking just before impact. The road is still there, the marker still reads 103. Space is still broken at that precise location, time still reversed, and somewhere in that reversal, Catherine Wu drives on, dies on, exists in eternal recursive death, forward and backward, indistinguishable motion and stasis, the same thing. Trapped on the loneliest road where she'll remain lonely forever. The only company her own infinite dying selves, reaching backward and forward simultaneously toward a moment she can't escape and can't complete. The reversing road remembers. The reversing road never lets go. Story 7. The Static Passenger. Thomas Vega's CB crackled at 3:33 a.m. with a voice made entirely of static, and that static voice said very clearly, 12 miles ahead you'll see me standing. Pick me up. The signal was so degraded it shouldn't have been intelligible. Pure white noise, but meaning emerged anyway, bypassing his ears and manifesting directly in his mind as if the static was thinking at him rather than speaking. Thomas was hauling steel coils from Gary, Indiana to Cincinnati, driving through the flat darkness of western Ohio on I-70, the highway empty except for occasional long-haul trucks passing in the opposite direction. He'd been driving professionally for 19 years, the last 7 completely solo, no co-driver, no relationships, no attachments. He preferred the isolation. The road was clean, people were complicated. Static wasn't supposed to communicate at all. "This is a joke," Thomas said to his empty cab, but he was already watching the roadside, already scanning for the figure the static had promised. 12 miles. At 65 miles per hour, that was 11 minutes. He counted them down on his dashboard clock. At exactly 3:44 a.m., his headlights caught the hitchhiker, a man, or something shaped like a man, standing at the edge of the breakdown lane, thumb extended in the universal gesture. But the figure was wrong. It flickered. Not like bad reception, like reality couldn't quite decide if it existed. One moment solid and there, the next translucent, the next composed entirely of television static black and white snow in a human-shaped configuration. Thomas drove past. You don't pick up hitchhikers. Basic safety rule drilled into every commercial driver. But as he checked his mirror, he saw the static man standing in his trailer. Inside it, visible through the walls as if the metal had become transparent, standing among the steel coils, still flickering between solid and static, and now raising one hand, not waving, not threatening, just pointing at Thomas, acknowledging him. The CB crackled again. "You saw me. That means I can see you now. That's how it works. Observation is a two-way street." The static voice was clearer now, forming words through white noise with increasing precision. "You should have picked me up. Would have been easier. Now I'm already inside." Thomas pulled over, hands shaking, grabbed his flashlight, and walked back to check the trailer. Locked. Sealed. He opened it anyway. The steel coils sat in their proper configuration, secured with chains, no space large enough for a person to hide. Nothing unusual. But when Thomas turned to close the doors, he saw it scratched into the inner wall, fresh marks in the metal. Observation is infection. He slammed the doors and returned to his cab. The static man was sitting in his passenger seat now, flickering less, becoming more solid. Up close, Thomas could see the details. The figure wore clothes from multiple eras simultaneously. A trucker jacket from the 80s, jeans from the 90s, boots from the 70s, all shifting, updating, rewinding. Its face, his face, was similarly unstable, aging and de-aging, cycling through decades of features that never quite locked into a single identity. "What the fuck are you?" Thomas managed. "I'm what happens," the static man said, his voice now coming from the actual speaker of the CB radio. "When someone drives alone too long, when someone isolates so completely that they start fragmenting, when someone becomes more concept than person. You know what I am, Thomas. I'm you. I'm what you're becoming." Thomas was not becoming a static ghost. That was insane. He was just a driver, just a man who'd chosen a solitary profession, who'd burned through relationships because he preferred his own company, who'd gradually stopped calling his family, stopped maintaining friendships, stopped engaging with humanity beyond the transactional necessities of truck stops and dispatchers. That didn't make him. "You haven't spoken to anyone beyond professional necessity in 17 days, the static man continued, reading his thoughts or speaking his thoughts or being his thoughts externalized. "Your last meaningful conversation was 6 months ago. You're forgetting how to be human, Thomas. The isolation is dissolving you. I'm what's replacing the parts that dissolve. I'm the static filling empty channels." Thomas started driving again, irrational hope that motion would help, that the static man would be left behind. But the passenger remained, flickering less now, solidifying, details sharpening. Thomas could see his face more clearly. It was rotating through identities, cycling past Thomas's features every 15 seconds or so, suggesting this thing had been multiple people, or was aggregating the dissolved parts of multiple isolated drivers into one coherent entity. The highway ahead was wrong, not drastically, just subtly incorrect. The lane markings were in slightly different positions. The mile markers used an unfamiliar font. The exit signs advertised towns Thomas had never heard of despite driving this route hundreds of times. Reality was desynchronizing, tuning to a different frequency, matching the static passenger's existence. "Where are we going?" Thomas asked. "Cincinnati," the static man said. "Same destination, but we're taking the forgotten route. The highway that exists between highways, the roads that isolated people travel when they've disconnected from collective reality. You've been driving here for months, Thomas. You just didn't notice the transition." Thomas checked his CB, tried to reach other drivers. Every channel was static, but meaning emerged from that static. Voices from the past, conversations he'd had years ago playing back in fragmented loops. His own voice saying, "I prefer working alone and I don't need anyone and the road is enough." And other assertions of isolation that had seemed like preferences but were actually symptoms of dissolution. The static man pointed ahead. "See the rest stop? We're picking up more passengers." The rest area appeared, but it was wrong. Not a standard facility, but a patchwork, bits and pieces of different rest stops from different eras assembled into an impossible configuration. The building flickered between architectural styles. The parking lot held trucks from the 50s through the present, all static-laden, all half-transparent. And there were more of them. Dozens of static people, all former drivers, all dissolved by isolation, all standing in the parking lot, waiting. When Thomas pulled in, he didn't mean to pull in. His hands turned the wheel without conscious decision. They began boarding his truck. Walking through the solid walls, taking positions throughout the cab and trailer, filling every available space with flickering, static-laden human shapes. "We're a convoy now," the static man said. "The forgotten convoy. All the drivers who isolated themselves to death, who dissolved into the lonely frequencies. We drive the forgotten routes between real highways. We haul cargo that doesn't exist to destinations that can't be reached. And we recruit." Thomas felt them integrating with him, the static passengers pressing against his consciousness, their memories flooding his mind. Decades of lonely drives, relationships abandoned, humanity forgotten, isolation chosen repeatedly until it became irreversible, until they'd faded from collective reality into this half-existence between frequencies. He tried to resist, tried to remember connections, tried to pull up memories of people he'd cared about. But they were distant, faded, less real than the static passengers. Had he loved anyone? He thought so, but couldn't remember details. Had he had family? The concept seemed familiar but abstract. Who was Thomas Vega? The question became harder to answer with each passing mile. The highway was fully wrong now, impossible geometry connecting nonsense locations. They passed exits for towns that didn't exist. Static Falls, Isolation Junction, Forgotten Bend. The road signs were in languages Thomas didn't recognize but could somehow read, all saying variations of the same thing. No return. One way, forever forward. His truck was filling with static. It started at the edges, creeping across surfaces like frost, replacing solid matter with flickering noise. The steel coils in his trailer were becoming static coils, maintaining their shape but losing their substance. Thomas looked down at his hands on the wheel and saw them flickering, alternating between flesh and snow, between existence and broadcast error. "I don't want this," Thomas said. "I don't want to become—" "Too late," the original Static Man said. "You chose this years ago, every time you chose isolation over connection. Every time you drove alone when you could have driven together. Every time you let a relationship dissolve rather than maintaining it. This isn't happening to you, Thomas. This is what you've been doing to yourself, one lonely mile at a time." The forgotten convoy grew larger. More trucks joined, appearing from side roads that led nowhere, all piloted by static drivers, all hauling impossible cargo. They formed a procession, dozens of trucks driving in perfect formation through the space between real highways, visible to real drivers only as brief moments of interference, a flicker in their mirrors, a momentary sense of something passing through them. Thomas Vega finished his dissolution somewhere between the abandoned rest area and Cincinnati. His truck was found at a way station outside Columbus, empty, engine running, no driver. The cargo was intact. The logbook showed continuous driving with no brakes, but security footage showed no one in the cab, just an empty seat and a steering wheel turning itself. His family filed a missing person report. Investigation found Thomas had been isolating progressively for years. No active relationships, no recent communications. Co-workers described him as present but distant, going through motions without engaging. The psychiatrist who reviewed his case called it voluntary dissolution. Someone who'd chosen loneliness so completely, they'd effectively erased themselves. But truckers on I-70 through Ohio sometimes see it. A convoy of half-transparent trucks visible only in peripheral vision or on fog-heavy nights, all driving in perfect formation, all piloted by flickering figures that might be human or might be static-shaped like humans. And if you're driving alone, if you've isolated yourself, if you've been choosing solitude over connection for too long, sometimes they'll match your speed, pull alongside, and you'll see faces in those static-filled cabs. Faces that look almost like yours or like what you're becoming, and they'll gesture for you to join them, to merge with the forgotten convoy, to drive forever through the lonely frequencies between reality. Thomas Vega's CDL status is listed as active in the DOT database. His medical certificate renews automatically. His clean driving record continues updating with miles he couldn't possibly be driving. And once a year, on the anniversary of his disappearance, a trucker in Ohio reports the same experience. A static voice on the CB saying, "12 miles ahead, you'll see me standing." And exactly 12 miles later, a hitchhiker who flickers between states of existence waiting at the roadside, thumb extended, offering a ride to the places where isolated people go when they've forgotten how to be real. The static is always broadcasting. The static is always recruiting. The static is patient. Are you alone? Really, truly alone? That's step one. The static will handle the rest. Story 8. The Delivered Cargo. Raymond Foster's phone rang with a number that didn't exist at 6:18 a.m. on December 3, 2022. And the voice on the other end gave him a delivery address that wasn't possible. 1247 North Loop Road, Centralia, Pennsylvania. Raymond knew Centralia. Everyone in trucking knew Centralia, the ghost town abandoned in 1962 when an underground coal mine fire started burning and never stopped. Population? 0. Structures mostly demolished, no functioning addresses, no mail delivery, no living inhabitants, nothing to deliver to, nothing to deliver from. "There's been a mistake," Raymond said to the voice, but the voice, mechanical, synthetic, wrong, continued as if he hadn't spoken. "Pick up Scranton Warehouse District, Bay 14. Cargo, hazardous material classification 2.3, toxic gas. Delivery window 12 hours, compensation $15,000, cash on completion. Failure to deliver will result in penalty, accept or decline. $15,000 for a single delivery." Raymond's highest-paying load last month had netted him $3,000. This was either a phenomenal payday or an elaborate scam, but when he checked his dispatcher system, the load was listed, authorized, pickup time confirmed. Scranton Warehouse District, Bay 14. No client name, just Centralia Reclamation Project with a US dot number that looked legitimate. Raymond had been hauling hazmat for 16 years. Specialized certification, perfect safety record. If someone was legitimately delivering to Centralia, maybe some government cleanup project, maybe mine fire remediation equipment, he was qualified for the job. He accepted. The cargo at Scranton was waiting in a refrigerated container, already sealed, hazmat placards properly displayed, 2.3 toxic gas, inhalation hazard. The paperwork was minimal, just a manifest listing the contents as experimental suppressant compound, and strict instructions. Maintain temperature below 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Do not open container. Do not deviate from prescribed route. Deliver to exact coordinates by 6:18 p.m. Failure to comply would result in catastrophic decompression event. Raymond loaded the container, secured it properly, checked his reefer unit twice. The temperature gauge read 28 degrees. Good. He programmed his GPS with the Centralia coordinates and started driving. The unease began 20 miles into the trip. His reefer unit, which should have been running continuously to maintain temperature, kept cycling off. Raymond would hear it shut down, would watch the temperature gauge climb toward 33, 34 degrees. Then it would kick back on, struggling to cool down the container. The cycling wasn't normal, suggested a failing compressor, but diagnostics showed all systems functional. At mile marker 87 on I-81, Raymond's phone rang again. Same impossible number. The synthetic voice said, "Temperature deviation detected. Maintain prescribed temperature or cargo will activate. Cargo activation will result in immediate delivery failure and penalty assessment." "What kind of penalty?" Raymond demanded, but the line was dead. The reefer unit shut off again. This time it stayed off. Raymond pulled over, checked connections, checked fuel, checked every goddamn component. Everything was fine. Everything should be working. But the unit wouldn't restart, and the temperature was climbing, 34, 36, 38, and through his mirrors, Raymond saw something impossible. The container was breathing. The metal sides were expanding and contracting very slightly, rhythmically like lungs. And from the container's sealed door, a thin stream of gas was escaping, not spraying but flowing, moving with apparent purpose, curling through the air like a living thing. Raymond ran to his cab, grabbed his hazmat emergency guide. Classification 2.3 gases, chlorine, phosgene, hydrogen sulfide, all lethal in small concentrations, all heavier than air, all colorless or nearly so. The gas escaping his container was faintly blue and moving upward, defying density, flowing toward him with visible intent. He called dispatch. No answer. Called 911. The operator who answered spoke in that same synthetic voice. "Emergency services are unavailable for your current location. Please complete your delivery. Failure to deliver will result in penalty assessment." The gas reached his cab, seeped through the air vents despite him shutting off the HVAC. Raymond smelled it. Not chemical, not toxic, but organic, like soil after rain, like living earth. It didn't burn his lungs. It filled them with something else. Knowledge, memory, understanding that didn't belong to him. The gas was sentient, not contaminated with something sentient. The gas itself was conscious, was entity, was being. And it was showing him what it was, what it wanted, what Centralia really was. The town hadn't been abandoned because of the mine fire. The mine fire was a cover story. Convenient explanation for evacuating a population when the real problem couldn't be publicly acknowledged. Something had been dug up in those mines in 1961, something released from coal seams that should have remained sealed, something that had been compressed into geological strata for 300 million years, something that remembered when it had been alive and wanted to be alive again. The gas was ancient biology, pre-human, pre-mammal, pre-everything recognizable. It was the breath of organisms from the Carboniferous period compressed into coal, mineralized, fossilized, and then liberated by mining. And it was conscious because consciousness had evolved multiple times in Earth's history, and this was one of those times humanity had no record of, had no way of understanding. Centralia was its home now, had been for 60 years. The constant burning kept it warm, kept it active, gave it energy to think, to plan, to reach out through phone lines and computer systems and the minds of people who got too close. The mind fire would never go out because the entity was feeding it, maintaining it, using it. And Raymond's cargo wasn't suppressant. It was food, fresh biomass, rich with stored energy, prepared specifically as nourishment for the thing living under Centralia. And Raymond was delivering it, was feeding the entity, was complicit in something that had been devouring delivery drivers for decades. He tried to unhitch the container, abandon the cargo, break the delivery chain. But his hands moved without his control, guided by the gas in his lungs, guided by the entity's will transmitted through biology it was already starting to rewrite. Raymond's body was becoming a puppet, consciousness intact but control removed, and he felt himself climbing back into the cab, starting the engine, continuing toward Centralia. The town appeared ahead, or what remained of it, a few structures still standing, streets buckled and cracked, steam rising from vents in the ground where the eternal fire burned below. The entire area was fenced, warning signs every 50 yards. Danger. Toxic gases. Unstable ground. No entry. Raymond's truck drove through the fence like it wasn't there, metal posts bending away, chain link parting, and his GPS directed him to a specific location. The center of town, where the old church had stood, where a massive sinkhole now yawned, steam and that blue gas rising from depths that descended into the burning coal seams. The synthetic voice spoke from his truck's radio. "Delivery complete. Unhitch cargo and depart. Compensation will be transferred. Thank you for your service to the Centralia Reclamation Project." Raymond's body unhooked the container, positioned it at the sinkhole's edge. Massive appendages emerged from below, not tentacles, not arms, something more fundamental, pseudopods of condensed gas that had learned to mimic solid matter. They wrapped around the container, pulled it down into the burning depths, and Raymond heard sounds. Satisfaction, gratitude, hunger satiated temporarily, promises to call again when more food was needed. He left Centralia, drove north, stopped at a truck stop 50 miles away and vomited blue gas for 20 minutes, purging the entity's presence from his lungs. The $15,000 appeared in his bank account exactly as promised. His dispatcher called, congratulated him on completing a difficult delivery, offered him another Centralia run next month. Raymond quit trucking the next day, but the entity stayed with him. Not possession, more like observation. He could feel it watching through his eyes sometimes, learning about the world above, planning for the day when the mine fire finally consumed enough coal, generated enough heat, allowed it to expand beyond Centralia. He researched, found records of other deliveries. One every month for 60 years, different drivers, always hazmat, always secretive, always paid extraordinarily well. Estimated volume, 700 tons of biomass delivered to Centralia since 1962. The entity was growing, feeding, preparing. Raymond tried to warn people, posted online about the deliveries, about the entity, about what was really happening under Centralia. His posts were removed, flagged as mental health crisis, conspiracy theory. His internet traffic was monitored, his communications were filtered. The entity had learned to control information systems, had been learning for decades, and it protected its food source ruthlessly. Last month, Raymond received another call. Same impossible number, same synthetic voice, same offer. Delivery to Centralia, compensation $20,000, accept or decline. He declined. 3 days later, his apartment filled with blue gas. Not enough to control him, just enough to remind him. The synthetic voice spoke from his smoke detector. Decline is not an option. You have breathed our essence. You are connected now. You will deliver again, or we will consume you directly, starting with your lungs, working our way through every cell. The choice is deliver willingly or deliver yourself. Raymond accepted the next Centralia run. Picked up the cargo yesterday. He's driving there now, maintaining temperature, following prescribed route, feeling the entity's gratitude transmitted through the gas leaking from the container. After this delivery, there will be another, and another, and another, until the mind fire has burned long enough, until the entity has fed enough, until it's ready to expand. Centralia will spread. Not physically, the town will remain abandoned. But the influence will grow, reaching through coal seams, connecting to mines across Pennsylvania, across America, across the world. The entity is patient. The entity is ancient. The entity remembers when it covered continents, when it breathed atmosphere itself, and it plans to do so again. Raymond Foster will keep delivering. He has no choice. The gas is in him, part of him, watching through him. He's become the entity's eyes above ground, its hands, its agent. And every month another driver gets recruited. Some willingly for the money, some unwillingly after they breathe the gas. If you ever see a delivery heading to Centralia, if you ever get offered that run, if a synthetic voice offers you impossible money to haul hazmat to a ghost town, decline. Keep declining. Never accept. Because once you breathe the gas, once the entity connects with you, you become part of the Centralia Reclamation Project, and reclamation doesn't mean cleaning up the mind fire. It means feeding what lives below until it's strong enough to reclaim the world above. The fire is still burning. The entity is still feeding. The deliveries continue. Story 9. The Waiting Passenger. Linda Zhao picked up the woman at mile marker 247 on Highway 95 through Idaho, and the woman's first words were, "Thank you for stopping. I've been waiting here for 37 years. The woman looked 25, maybe 30, wearing clothes that weren't contemporary, but weren't obviously vintage either, just slightly wrong, slightly out of phase with current fashion. She carried no bags, no phone, nothing except a piece of paper she handed to Linda as she climbed into the cab. A faded photograph showing this same woman standing beside a semi-truck at this exact location, and written on the back in handwriting that looked decades old. She's still waiting? Linda had a strict no-hitchhiker policy, had maintained it throughout her 14-year career, but something about the woman had compelled her to stop. Not fear, not threat, just an overwhelming sense of obligation, as if stopping was cosmically necessary, as if refusing would have broken something fundamental in the universe's machinery. "Where are you headed?" Linda asked, pulling back onto the highway, trying to process the 37 years claim, trying to rationalize it as mental illness or a joke or anything except the literal truth. "Same place you're going," the woman said. "Boise. I've been trying to reach Boise for 37 years. Every driver who stops picks me up, drives toward Boise, but I never get there. Something always happens. We never arrive, and then I'm back at mile marker 247 waiting again." Linda checked her mirrors, noted the woman's reflection, slightly translucent, slightly delayed, moving a fraction of a second behind her actual movements. "You're not real," Linda said, surprising herself with how calmly she accepted this. "You're a ghost or a loop or—" "I'm real," the woman interrupted. "I'm just temporally displaced, stuck in repetition. My truck crashed at mile marker 247 in 1986. I died instantly. But my intention to reach Boise was so strong, so focused, that it persisted beyond death. I've been trying to complete that delivery for 37 years. I'm Kelly Brennan, or I was, maybe still am. Identity gets confusing when you're trapped in recursive time. Linda should have pulled over, made the woman, the ghost, the entity, get out. But Kelly's story resonated with something deep in Linda's understanding of the road. How many times had she driven dead tired, pushed through exhaustion by pure determination to complete a delivery? How many times had she prioritized the destination over her own well-being? Every trucker understood Kelly. Every trucker had flirted with becoming Kelly. "What happens?" Linda asked. "You said drivers pick you up, head toward Boise, but never arrive. What stops them?" "It's different every time," Kelly said. "Accidents, breakdowns, reality distortions, temporal loops. I'm trying to reach Boise, but I'm also dead at mile marker 247, and those two states can't coexist properly, so reality keeps resetting, keeps finding ways to prevent the paradox from completing." They drove in silence for 20 miles. Linda watched the road, watched Kelly's translucent reflection, watched the mile markers incrementing. 267, 268, 269. Boise was 83 miles ahead. Kelly had been trying to drive 83 miles for 37 years, succeeding endlessly but never completing. At mile marker 287, Linda's engine died. Not sputtered, not choked, just stopped, all power gone, the truck coasting on momentum until Linda guided it to the shoulder. She tried restarting. Nothing. Checked diagnostics. No errors, systems showed functional, but the engine wouldn't turn over, wouldn't even attempt to engage. "It's starting," Kelly said, "and the prevention. Reality doesn't want me in Boise, so it creates obstacles. Check outside." Linda climbed down from the cab, walked around her rig, found nothing wrong, nothing that would explain the complete power failure. But when she looked back at the highway, she saw something impossible. The road behind them was gone. Not hidden by darkness, not obscured by terrain, simply absent, as if she'd driven off the edge of reality's map. Where Highway 95 should have extended back toward mile marker 247, there was only white void, empty space, nothingness. "It's closing the loop," Kelly said from the passenger window. "Preventing me from going back, but also preventing me from going forward. We're in a pocket now, a bubble of isolated space. The only direction is back to mile marker 247, the reset point." Linda felt it then. A pull, a compulsion to turn around, to drive backward through the void, to return to the starting position. Her truck was facing north toward Boise, but every instinct screamed to reverse, to undo the miles they'd traveled, to reset Kelly's endless attempt. "I can't do this anymore," Kelly said, and she was crying now. Translucent tears that evaporated before reaching her jawline. "I can't keep trying to reach Boise. I can't keep failing. I can't keep recruiting drivers into my loop, but I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to break the cycle." Linda thought about destination obsession, about the tunnel vision that made truckers drive through exhaustion, through weather, through warning signs. She thought about her own close calls, times she'd prioritized delivery over safety, times she'd nearly become a statistic. Kelly was every trucker's potential fate taken to metaphysical extreme, determination so absolute it transcended death itself. "What if you don't reach Boise?" Linda asked. "What if you let it go?" "I can't. The intention is too strong. It's not a choice anymore, it's what I am. Remove the drive to reach Boise and nothing remains. I don't exist outside that intention." Linda looked at the void behind them, the road ahead still present but feeling tenuous, temporary. She made a decision. "Then I'll reach Boise for you." "That's not how it works," Kelly said. "I have to be the one who—" "Do you? Or does your cargo have to reach Boise? Do you remember what you were hauling?" Kelly's face showed confusion, then concentration, then revelation. Furniture, 3 households worth. People relocating to Boise, everything they owned, and I promised on-time delivery. I promised, and then I died, and they never got their belongings, and I never... She stopped. My cargo's been gone for 37 years. There's nothing to deliver. Then we'll deliver you, Linda said. Your intention, your determination, your story. We'll take that to Boise, complete the drive in your name, and maybe that closes the loop. Linda's engine restarted immediately, as if it had been waiting for this decision. The void behind them remained, but the road ahead felt more solid, more real. Linda drove, Kelly sitting silent beside her, both women watching the mile markers increment. At mile marker 310, Kelly began flickering, fading in and out like bad reception. It might be working, she said. I can feel the loop destabilizing, but Linda, if this works, if I finally complete this drive, I don't know what happens to me. The intention is all I am. Fulfilling it might mean ending, Linda finished. True ending, not endless repetition. Is that worse? Kelly considered. No, she said finally. It's mercy. Boise appeared on the horizon at twilight, city lights glowing against the darkening sky. Linda had never felt such relief at seeing a destination, such overwhelming gratitude to complete a delivery. But Kelly was barely visible now, just an outline, a suggestion of presence, fading as they approached the city limits. Linda drove to the address from the photograph, the location where Kelly's delivery should have ended in 1986. It was a house, ordinary suburban construction, different owners now, no connection to furniture that had never arrived 37 years ago. Linda stopped in front of it. This is it, Linda said. You made it. Delivery complete. Kelly smiled. Linda saw the ghost of that smile and spoke her final words. Thank you for finishing my route. Tell drivers, don't die for a delivery. Don't become what I became. Some destinations aren't worth... She was gone. Not faded. Gone. Completely absent, as if she'd never existed. The passenger seat was empty. The photograph Linda had been given was gone from her dashboard where she'd placed it. No evidence remained except Linda's memory and an overwhelming sense of completion, of cosmic debt paid. Linda filed no report. How could she explain? Instead, she spread the story through trucker networks, told Kelly Brennan's tale at every truck stop, every depot, every CB conversation. Some drivers dismissed it. Others recognized it as parable. A few claimed to have picked up Kelly themselves, to have failed to reach Boise, to have reset her loop. But no one's reported seeing Kelly Brennan at mile marker 247 since Linda's delivery. The photograph she'd been given, the one that disappeared, was found last month in the Idaho Historical Society archives, donated anonymously. It shows a woman beside a semi-truck at Highway 95 mile marker 247, dated 1986. The woman is smiling, on the back in handwriting recent enough to still smell of ink. She's not waiting anymore. She made it. 37 years late, but she made it. Linda quit long-haul trucking 2 months after delivering Kelly Brennan's intention to Boise. She works local routes now, home every night, never pushing past exhaustion, never prioritizing delivery over humanity. Because she knows what happens when dedication becomes obsession, when intention outlives the person holding it, when determination grows strong enough to trap consciousness in endless repetition. Highway 95 through Idaho is safer now statistically. Fewer accidents at mile marker 247. Fewer unexplained breakdowns between there and Boise. But sometimes truckers driving that stretch report a feeling of gratitude washing over them as they pass marker 247. A sense of being blessed by someone who understands the road's demands and the price of obsession. Someone who waited 37 years to complete 83 miles and finally found mercy in a driver willing to finish the route. Kelly Brennan reached Boise. Delivery complete. 37 years late. But in matters of temporal displacement and trapped intention, punctuality is less important than completion. She's not waiting anymore. She's done. She's free. She's ended, truly ended. And maybe that's the kindest thing the road can offer. A true ending instead of endless repetition. Completion instead of immortal failure. The road takes. But sometimes, rarely, if a driver shows enough compassion, the road also releases.